Welcome back to Odd Occasions, your go-to channel for the strange, the eerie, and the downright chilling. Today we're taking you on a journey back in time, long before the 20th century, to uncover some of America's most notorious serial killers who lurked in the shadows of history. From river pirates and twisted con artists to cold-blooded murderers, these figures may not be as infamous as their modern counterparts, but their horrifying acts have left a dark stain on America's past. Buckle up. These killers operated in an era before modern forensics, and their stories offer a chilling glimpse into the darker side of American history. Number 10. Samuel Mason. Samuel Mason wasn't always destined for a life of crime. In fact, he began as a militia captain, fighting for independence during the American Revolution. But after the war, Mason's fortunes took a turn for the worse. Saddled with debt and losing his farm, he chose a new path, one of violence and lawlessness. Mason became the leader of a notorious band of river pirates, terrorizing travelers along the Ohio River in the late 18th century. His gang would lure unsuspecting victims to a riverside camp, offering a place to rest, only to rob and brutally murder them in the morning. As his crimes mounted, so did his infamy. By 1802, there was a $2,000 bounty on Mason's head, an enormous sum for the time. When he was finally caught, Spanish authorities found not only stolen goods in his possession, but something far more grisly: 20 human scalps, a sickening testament to his bloodthirsty nature. However, Mason's criminal saga didn't end with his arrest. Before he could be hanged for his crimes, he managed to escape custody. Fleeing back to his gang, he believed he was safe. But greed proved more dangerous than any bounty hunter. 2 of his own men betrayed him, killing him and delivering his severed head to authorities in an attempt to claim the reward. But instead of collecting their prize, they were recognized as members of Mason's gang and were hanged themselves in 1804. Number 9. Patty Cannon. Patty Cannon was more than just a criminal. She was the sadistic leader of a notorious gang of slave catchers in the early 19th century. From 1820 to 1829, Cannon and her group operated with one brutal purpose: kidnapping freed African Americans and selling them back into slavery, falsely claiming they were runaway slaves. For Cannon, though, it wasn't just about the money. She reveled in cruelty. Her methods were ruthless, and she had a sick fascination with torture. In one particularly brutal case, after a disagreement over payment, Cannon and her sons murdered a group of slavers, all because they felt they had been cheated. This act of violence led to her eventual arrest and trial, not just for murder, but for the heinous crime of kidnapping free men and women. While it's known she personally killed at least 4 people, many believe she was involved in far more deaths, even if she wasn't always the one pulling the trigger. Patty Cannon remains one of the darkest figures in American history, her legacy etched in cruelty and terror. Number 8. Samuel Green. Samuel Green's life was marked by violence from the very beginning. Raised in a brutal household, Green was sent to live with a family friend who beat him relentlessly for any small misstep. As a young boy, he began to take out his anger on helpless animals. He stabbed farm animals and even drowned his own pet dog in a well. His violent tendencies only earned him harsher punishments, with one beating so severe it flayed the skin from his back. As Green grew older, so did his cruelty. By 1817, after falling into poverty, he embarked on a vicious crime spree across New England. Breaking into homes, he didn't just steal. He murdered anyone unfortunate enough to cross his path, often bludgeoning his victims to death. His reign of terror earned him the title of Public Enemy Number 1, the first in America's history. Even after his capture and imprisonment in Boston, Green's violent ways didn't stop. He tried to escape multiple times, and in one instance, when an inmate betrayed his plans, Green took revenge by beating the man to death with an iron bar inside the prison workshop. In 1822, after years of murder, theft, and terror, Samuel Green was sentenced to death. He was hanged on April 25, 1822, bringing an end to the life of one of New England's most feared criminals. Number 7. Edward Rulloff. Edward Rulloff was no ordinary criminal. A man of education and intellect, he seemed the very picture of sophistication. But beneath that veneer lay a dark and twisted mind, driven by an insatiable ego and a thirst for control. By the time he moved to Dryden, New York, to study botanical medicine, Rulloff had already spent time in prison, serving 2 years in Canada for embezzlement. In New York, he met and married his professor's 17-year-old cousin. Soon, his manipulative and sadistic tendencies surfaced, and their relationship quickly soured. Despite this, the couple had a daughter. But less than a year later, both mother and child mysteriously disappeared. Suspicion quickly fell on Rulloff. He was seen driving a wagon with a trunk in the back, heading toward a nearby lake around the time his wife and daughter vanished. Yet, with no bodies, the law couldn't prove murder. Instead, Rulloff was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to 10 years in prison. And it wasn't long before he learned he would face trial for murder, but Rulloff had no intention of sticking around for that. He escaped prison, changed his name, and drifted across New York, committing petty crimes. His luck ran out in 1870 after a botched robbery in Binghamton, New York, where he killed a store employee. Once captured, his true identity was revealed. In one of the most publicized trials of the time, Edward Rulloff was sentenced to death and hanged in 1871. While some claim he was the last person executed by hanging in New York, the true honor went to John Greenwald in 1889. Number 6, Thomas D. Carr. Thomas D. Carr's life was shaped by violence from an early age. Born in West Virginia in 1846, Carr fled his abusive father at just 15 years old by enlisting in the Union Army during the Civil War. But escaping his home didn't free him from the darkness within. By 1869, Carr was working as a coal miner in Ohio and courting a 13-year-old girl named Louisa Fox. Though Carr was 10 years older, Louisa's parents initially approved of the relationship. But soon after, disturbing stories began to surface. Tales of Carr's violent outbursts and extreme mood swings. When Louisa's parents decided to call off the engagement, Carr was enraged. One evening, as Louisa walked home, he waited for her in the shadows. He kissed her, then, without hesitation, slashed her throat with a straight razor. After the horrific act, Carr returned home and attempted to take his own life, but failed. He was arrested the following day. While in custody, Carr not only confessed to Louisa's murder, but also claimed to have killed 14 other men during his life. Whether all of those murders were true or not, Carr's fate was sealed. He was executed by hanging on March 24, 1870. Number 5, Lydia Sherman. Lydia Sherman seemed like the perfect housekeeper and caregiver, a motherly figure with a kind demeanor. But behind that innocent mask lurked a cold-blooded killer. Over the span of 7 years, from 1864 to 1871, Sherman orchestrated a series of murders that claimed the lives of 11 people, all for money. Her first marriage ended in a series of tragedies. Her husband and their 6 children all died from mysterious illnesses, initially believed to be typhoid fever, but later investigations revealed the horrifying truth. They had all been poisoned with arsenic. Lydia had slipped the poison into their food and patiently waited as the inheritance came her way. She repeated the deadly cycle with her second husband, an elderly farmer who also fell victim to arsenic poisoning. Then, during her third marriage, both her husband and his 2 children from a previous relationship died under suspicious circumstances. In her chilling confession, Lydia claimed she only meant to kill the stepchildren, and that her husband's death had been accidental. Though she briefly escaped prison, Lydia was caught less than a year later. Justice came for her in an unexpected way. She fell severely ill while behind bars. Lydia Sherman died in prison on May 16, 1878, leaving behind a legacy of deceit, greed, and death. Number 4, Jesse Pomeroy. Jesse Pomeroy's story is one of chilling cruelty, made even more disturbing by his young age. Born in 1859 in Charlestown, Massachusetts, Pomeroy was bullied from the start. His right eye was covered by a white film, a deformity that repulsed many and made him an easy target. But the torment he endured from others soon turned into a dark desire to inflict suffering on those weaker than him. In 1872, Pomeroy's family moved to South Boston. It wasn't long before his violent tendencies escalated. In 1874, he lured a 4-year-old boy to a remote marsh in Dorchester Bay, where he brutally murdered and mutilated the child's body. Authorities quickly tied him to the crime. Boot tracks found near the body matched perfectly with a pair of Pomeroy's shoes. Once in custody, Pomeroy gave a full confession, admitting not only to the boy's murder but also to killing a 10-year-old girl months earlier, burying her under an ash pile. Despite his age, only 14 at the time, Pomeroy was sentenced to death, but the governor of Massachusetts refused to sign the warrant, sparing Pomeroy's life. Instead, he spent the next 58 years behind bars, a living reminder of youthful brutality. Jesse Pomeroy died in prison in 1932 at the age of 72, having spent almost his entire life locked away for his horrific crimes. Number 3. Stephen Dee Richards. Stephen Dee Richards would later be known as the Nebraska Fiend, a title earned through his horrific crimes. Born in West Virginia around 1856, Richards lived a relatively quiet life in his youth, spending much of it in Ohio. But that would all change when he took a job at the Iowa Lunatic Asylum in Mount Pleasant. Assigned to one of the most violent wards, Richards claimed that his time there stripped away any empathy he had for humanity. By 1878, Richards was traveling across the Midwest, looking for opportunities and victims. In Nebraska, he entered negotiations with a woman who owned property. But before the deal could be finalized, Richards made a chilling decision. He murdered the woman and her 3 children, burying their bodies in a mass grave on the land he had intended to purchase. A month later, he killed a neighbor with a hammer, seemingly without remorse. When Richards was finally caught, he freely confessed, not only to these brutal murders, but to 4 additional killings over the previous 2 years. Rejecting any legal counsel, Richards was sentenced to hang in 1879. Before his execution, a reporter interviewed him, offering the public a rare glimpse into the twisted mind of the Nebraska Fiend. Stephen Dee Richards was executed that same year, leaving behind a legacy of cold-blooded violence that shocked the nation. Number 2, Carl Feigenbaum. Carl Feigenbaum's story is one that blurs the line between fact and chilling speculation. Born in Germany, Feigenbaum was a sailor who eventually found himself in the United States, where he was convicted of a gruesome crime, the murder of his landlord. But what makes Feigenbaum so intriguing is not just this singular act of violence. It's the theory that he may have been one of the most infamous killers of all time, Jack the Ripper. This suspicion was first raised by Feigenbaum's own lawyer. After his execution in 1896, the lawyer claimed that Feigenbaum had confessed to committing the infamous Ripper murders in London. This confession, paired with the theory that Jack the Ripper might have been a sailor or merchant, has given rise to the idea that Feigenbaum could be the man behind the brutal killings in Whitechapel. While the evidence is circumstantial, the idea that Feigenbaum used his travels as a cover for his murders has sparked serious debate. Was he truly the elusive Jack the Ripper, or just another violent man with blood on his hands? We may never know for sure. But what's clear is that Feigenbaum likely claimed more lives in other countries, murders that even today remain unsolved and unconnected to his name. Number 1, H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes wasn't just a con artist. He was one of the most infamous and calculating serial killers in American history. Born Herman Mudgett, Holmes reinvented himself in 1886, when he moved to Chicago and adopted the more memorable name we know today. At first, he was a smooth-talking fraudster, manipulating people into trusting him, only to rob them blind. But in the early 1890s, his schemes took a much darker turn. Holmes didn't kill for the thrill of it. He killed for profit. He seduced wealthy women, gained access to their finances, and then disposed of them. But his greed didn't stop there. Holmes took out life insurance policies on some of his employees and collected the payouts after they met with unfortunate accidents. His most notorious creation was the so-called Murder Castle, a hotel he claimed to be building for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. But this was no ordinary hotel. The upper floors were a maze of trap rooms and dead-end hallways. Some rooms had hidden chutes that led straight to the basement, where Holmes would dispose of his victims' bodies in gruesome ways, some even dissolved in vats of acid. Holmes was eventually caught and hanged in 1896. Officially, he was tied to 9 murders, but the true number of victims remains a mystery. Some estimates suggest he may have killed as many as 27, while others believe the number could be far higher. His murder castle became a symbol of the unimaginable horror lurking behind a charming smile. Thanks for watching Odd Occasions, where we delve into the macabre side of history. If today's list left you chilled or curious about more forgotten horrors, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Let us know in the comments which case shocked you the most, and if there's a topic you'd like us to cover next. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, Dark history is never as far away as it seems.